It's a huge question, but I mean, to put it very, very simply, Africa has been integrated into the world economy on a different set of terms and relationships than most other parts of the world. Africa's poverty 150 years ago was not distinctly different from poverty as experienced elsewhere. What is happening now is that poverty in one particular part of the world is being deepened. We had statistics today about immiseration, falling life expectancy, rather than improving as elsewhere. And Africa's absolute poverty is also at an accelerating rate a relative poverty. Globalisation is increasing the wealth and the power of parts of the world, but it is also increasing more rapidly than has ever been experienced before, inequality across the world. That certainly seems to be one of the economic motors running at the moment.
Right.
Concentration of wealth on the one hand, and the ability to move wealth and do things with it that is unparalleled in history. I think we are facing a generation. We're talking this weekend about looking back, how could they have sustained slavery 200 years ago? I have an historian's fear that our children's children will look back and wonder how could we have stood by? I don't think it's a very useful approach to do a kind of cost and loss benefit, and people do try that. I think what is absolutely clear is that colonialism put countries on a different kind of developmental path. It, in particular, in the case of Africa, it tended to accentuate dependence on certain primary commodities. And that was fine at the point, say, of Zambian independence, when copper was a highly needed and very valuable commodity. But with the slide of copper prices and other base metal prices in the 1980s, Zambia and the Zambian economy took a beating that has never recovered from. We heard something of the same for Tanzanian coffee growers today. And there's an absolutely clear, there's a straight line relationship between those monocrop or monometal dependent economies and the colonial past. I think the parallel is a very real one. It's quite clearly we are still on the up or up near the top of the cycle. But as the world exhausts its fossil fuels, as oil becomes a declining resource, and as it's replaced by other sources, as it will be in due course, I think something very similar will take place. The greatest threat to Africa is marginalization. I'm with you 100% on that one. And globalization may visit certain ills, and I believe it does, on poor countries, but it also provides ways of escaping them. I thought it's almost like a parable. The little story we had today about the carpenter in a Tanzanian village using the internet to rip off the IP of IKEA, to put it very cruelly. No, but I thought that was a fascinating little tale of how access to a global knowledge source can have a transforming effect in a Tanzanian village. I think that a lot of the aid that went there was compromised in two fundamental ways. A great deal of it, particularly during the Cold War, was tied aid. It was conditional aid. Aid that came with very, very explicit sets of strings. We're giving you money, you will take these products from us, etc. That was one shortcoming of aid. Another one, which I think is only more recently being fully understood, is how flimsy and inadequate and counterproductive very often the recipient structures were in aid-receiving countries. And that was everything from looting and aid going in to line the pockets of elites, and there was plenty of that, to simple inability to use it properly, so that very, very often aid grants were made and then not drawn down on, and the aid wasn't spent or applied properly. So I do think that the emphasis in recent years on governance is an important one. I think that quite often it remains a very formal and a rather state-bound view of governance. I think that an emphasis on governance that also brings in empowering ordinary people is critical to the future of aid. I think in parts it is. There's a very significant shared energy initiative in the, whatever they are, the 8 or 9 countries that comprise SADC, the South African Development Economic Community. And I would agree with the premise, the, if you like, the Brussels premise, that energy needs can probably best be dealt with on transnational and international basis than at national level. I shall take with me an array of images. I will remember the plastic bottle on a roof in rural Africa being naturally pasteurized by the sun's rays. I'll take the vivid overhead we had of Africa at night, a visual representation of energy deficit at a continental level. I cherish the memory of the coffee mama, the saleswoman selling porridge, sorry, not coffee, but the porridge mama, now able to use a mobile phone to bring in more maize meal. And although those are only images, I do think that this morning's session said important things about technology, about the need to embrace technology from the low-cost, low-tech, appropriate, available models across to high-tech, to the ability to bring in transnational solutions at the energy level, or to leapfrog the landline and go straight to mobile telephony. I think there's a great deal there for us, and a very significant part of this morning's inputs concerned the importance of knowledge, concerned the importance of education and of understanding, and in what I heard, the importance of democratizing knowledge in Africa. I certainly don't class myself as an Afro-pessimist, and there's an awful lot of Afro-pessimism around. I sometimes say that I'm neither a pessimist nor an optimist, I'm a realist. And I do think that one has to confront the challenges, some of the challenges that we heard expressed today. But there are also potential solutions to that. Africa is a young continent, and there are enormous energies that come from populations with a youthful age structure. You have to cure hookworm and malaria and other things to benefit from that. But I believe that one of Africa's enormous resources is its human resource. One of the tragedies of modern Africa is an African diaspora, which sees many of its best and brightest minds in other parts of the world. And I think there are very encouraging signs that it's possible to reverse the brain drain, or at least to temper it when there's a slight economic upturn. People do go back home. People go where they belong. And I am a great supporter of schemes which explicitly try to reverse brain drain. We've got to cling to the brighter aspects of the future, because the alternative, the marginalization and the downward spiral of a continent, is quite simply morally and politically repugnant to contemplate.